What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So we're at the heels of the news that Gotham Knights has finally gone gold, and I thought it'd be right that I talk a little bit about some lessons that we've learned so far just following this game and seeing a lot of what we perceive as maybe some of the development challenges, maybe marketing challenges, and just a few things that I thought, were quite peculiar about this project from the side of the consumer. Now, I'm sure there are probably lessons learned inside the development side that I'm certain the developers can share with us. And it'd be nice if maybe Warner Brothers will allow for Patrick Redding or Jeff Eleanor or Fleur Marty or somebody to write a book about this experience so that we can read it someday. But on the side of the, consumer, I think there are just a few things that we can kind of put out here because we observe things differently. And I think we probably can share some value back and forth in a conversation of this nature. So one thing about Gotham Knights that I already sensed immediately, I knew exactly what the developers were trying to bring towards their community in terms of their vision, was how ambitious the game actually is. Now, the game has gone gold, so it basically signals that production is at its final stage, and maybe there are probably a few things that need to be fine-tuned, but right now the game is going for digital media. And the ambition of Gotham Knights was already set up in the fact that they wanted to bring 4 different playable knights and actually go against the paradigm or go against the grain by making a game that did not feature Batman, but was a telling of their own way and an own story of this entire universe. And so that ambition itself was actually quite big. Now, what really made the ambition bigger was the fact that Warner Brothers Games Montreal had only developed one video game where it was an older team that did that, and they required a lot of the help of Rocksteady and made the game in the same universe of Rocksteady. So they wanted to make their own game and they wanted to do their own thing and start from the scratch. And so if I look back and, in hindsight, I'm certain that there's probably some level or some community of people that agree with me that in the future, maybe Warner Brothers Montreal might be benefited from actually making a single player game, and one that does have ambition, but is still realistic to showcase a lot of what their expertise is. I felt that executing Gotham Knights was extremely ambitious for a team with that amount of experience and a team that had actually gone through different kinds of changes in its own, right and existence. So perhaps a single player game like a Batgirl game or a Nightwing game would have probably worked way better for them because they would have been able to focus all of their energy in bringing the character to life, bringing a story to life, bringing an open world to life of some kind, maybe not having the biggest detail, but kind of maybe following, say, some of the paradigms that have been followed in games like Marvel's Spider-Man or even Batman Arkham City and Arkham Knight, where yes, you have a detailed and a big open world, but you can actually make one that is actually good for one protagonist to interact with. And maybe their Superman game that was rumored back in like 2015 could have been that game that was able to execute this level of their ambition, but it then got canceled. And another thing too is I'm not necessarily concluding that the developers or the creative direction actually wanted to make this game per se. I think they probably had a blueprint in the mandate that was given to them. You see, there was an interview that Patrick Redding actually did at the SDDC with, I think, comicbook.com. And he said something along the lines of, when we received the mandate to actually make this game, and that's how he prefaced the statement. So listen to that preface again, when we received the mandate to make this game. So this is one of those things where we hear the stories where people sometimes will say, well, it seems like executives sometimes will kind of give a vision of a game to developers. And I'm certain that there's probably some element of that towards the production of Gotham Knights, especially if the Damian Wayne game was already canceled. So it seemed to me like the creative direction of the team was to follow in their strong suit, which is the experience of having made a single player game. But apparently somebody thought maybe a game that would encourage multiplayer, multiple protagonists, something that people can play co-op would probably be something of a better product to allow for longevity, maybe a way for them to maybe sell or market monetization elements. But then as they were developing the game, it seemed like everybody realized that those monetization elements had an adverse reaction once we saw exactly what happened with Marvel Avengers. So somewhere in the middle, I think there was also the decision, and this is just me hypothesizing, to pull that away, and that was not necessarily going to work. But it seemed like Warner Brothers Games Montreal, the team there, worked with everything that they were given to deliver this project. And I think in the future, they are probably better served to pour their ambition into a singular focus rather than trying to do a game with multiple protagonists. Now, in the case of, say, a game like Batman Arkham Knight, you see, that game actually did have a lot of really cool elements attached to it. It was a game that actually brought Rocksteady's development to a full circle to showcase exactly what their framework had already matured into. They were not only able to bring Batman to light, they were able to bring some combat elements where you could not necessarily only play Batman, but you can play Batman and other heroes or anti-heroes together in the same mission, in the same scenario, and actually play something of a tag team using two different heroes of your choice. And it was actually a very cool mechanic. This was very radically different from what they had done in, say, the other Arkham games. Now, if you think about the next game that Rocksteady is actually working on, it's a game that's going to have a system that is actually similar to this. And that's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, where you can basically have 4 characters, 3 of them are AI, and you can switch and select to any of them and play as them. So Rocksteady already developed the muscles. They already developed the strength to be able to make a game of such an ambition by actually dropping multiple projects in the past, then dropping the Arkham series and revolutionizing everything about, superhero video games. And then now they're at this point where they're saying they want to go ahead and take on the next challenge. I feel like Warner Brothers Games Montreal was put in a position where they basically were thrown into the deep end of the pool. But I'm thinking it to myself that it's commendable that they still were able to come out in this position that they are. But in the future, it will probably make some sense that they actually are able to kind of explore mechanics that are, quite, in a sense, simple, but beautiful and are easy to polish, easy to create very, very nuanced elements out of before they pursue something like this in the future. Another lesson that I can say we've learned in all of this is that the past gen consoles are really, really way past their time at this stage. I think this has always been the limitations surrounding console gaming in the sense, because console gaming does have a lot of pros to it. I mean, it's very hard for you to find a huge list of cons or a huge list of drawbacks that relate to console gaming. I mean, if I were to maybe list them, I'll probably list them in one hand and that would be it. It's not necessarily that big of a deal to many people, but there are drawbacks. And some of them include having to pay for other services like PlayStation Plus and maybe Xbox Live or whatever it is, as compared to maybe, say, if you're playing on the Epic Games platform or if you're playing on Steam, where the servers are usually the servers that belong to the video game companies that are available for multiplayer, or some games allow for dedicated servers here and there. So there seems to be more flexibility on the PC platform, and it doesn't cost you anything extra in many cases, unless the game has some kind of an arrangement where you pay extra for specific things. You don't necessarily have to do that. So that's one con. Another one that's a con is pretty much the hardware and the limitations in terms of price and how much you can actually pack into a box for a console, compared to, say, maybe a gaming PC, which at the same time is a pro to console gaming because that limitation allows for them to be able to build it to an affordable standard where more people can afford it, if you get what I mean. But at the same time, that particular aspect is the biggest limiting factor for video games to be more ambitious. At this stage, nonetheless, the new generation of consoles are able to carry very solid gaming experiences. And so I think it's time for developers to start building their games from ground up. If they're actually, working on a project or in the middle of a project, to start to consider that the old generation of consoles may not necessarily allow for them to be able to fulfill a lot of their, ambitions. And we're already seeing that trend right now. Suicide Squad came out straight out of the bat with a PlayStation 4, Series X, and, PC release exclusive. Wonder Woman also seeming like it's only going to be in the current gen consoles. Not like the team and the developers could not make, a Wonder Woman game that would run on the other consoles. I mean, they made Expansive Worlds and Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor, and Shadow of War. But if they really want to go the extra mile, the hardware for the consoles doesn't necessarily allow for them. And I think this is where Gotham Knights, probably found itself and decided that it needed to basically make that move and go that direction. And so this lesson has been really valid over the course of this game because the game got delayed, and we got to see some really interesting, conversations around the gaming industry as well with other delays, as Gotham Knights was not necessarily ashamed to pretty much just state its reason for its move to the new gen consoles, having stayed for 1 year in its own delay loophole. Or loop, whatever it is you want to call it. Right now, we see Hogwarts Legacy, we see Midnight Suns. Both games are citing that they want to bring the best experience for the Xbox and the PlayStation 4. And even the Switch is probably not going to be getting a version of the Hogwarts Legacy game for a little bit. Even though some studios have been able to execute games on the Switch using streaming services, it doesn't seem like that even still helps the entire scenario and resolves the problem for a lot of these video games. So these valuable lessons, I think, are probably going to serve this studio as they're going forward in the future. I'm hoping that somehow, somewhere, the heads and the top dogs can actually allow for them to eventually bring forward a project that they've envisioned in the past before, like possibly a Superman project in their own right. You see, once they finish this game, or at least while this game was in development, I can almost say for sure that studios of that size are usually in a conceptual phase of another game. So I'm hoping that their other game, whatever it may be, is a really cool DC game like the Arrow game or maybe the Flash, and something that they can actually work on one superhero, harness all of their development experience around building worlds, and then basically bring a very solid gameplay experience with that hero to the audiences. They can also do a Superman game. They're using Unreal Engine 4 now, and Unreal Engine 5 is already here. So that could be a very interesting way for them to be able to harness the power of that engine in streaming worlds on these new consoles. Because if you guys know, the Unreal Engine 5 was actually built to complement these new gen consoles and actually allow for you to be able to do a whole bunch of stuff with them. So these are some of the lessons so far that I think Gotham Knights and the developers have, in my own observation anyways, would have actually been able to glean from this entire experience. And as an observer from the outside, I think these lessons are probably going to be valuable to help them be successful in their future projects as well. I think Gotham Knights is going to be fine. Even though there will be critics and everything that's going to be judging the development harshly and all that stuff, or whatever it is, at the end of the day, this is the second project from this team. There's going to be a lot to consider in all of the evaluation surrounding Gotham Knights. But I'm going to go ahead and just end this video. And if there's any lesson that you think should have been learned, leave it in the comment section. Let's have a conversation surrounding this. Thanks so much for watching the video. Peace out.